It was a quiet Thursday evening at Mesquite Valley Community Health Center, a modest clinic located about 20 miles north of the Texas-Mexico border, nestled in a sunbaked town with constant movement of seasonal workers and undocumented migrants. The structure itself bore the weary marks of years in service: faded cream-colored walls, scuffed linoleum tiles, and old, yellowing medical posters that curled slightly at the corners. The overhead fluorescent lights buzzed with a low mechanical hum, casting a stark brightness over the nearly deserted waiting area. The clinic operated on limited resources, with just a handful of doctors and nurses covering night shifts. It was 10 p.m. and Dr. Marco Valdez, an internist with 13 years of experience in border region healthcare, had just walked an elderly man with a respiratory infection out of the exam room, offering detailed instructions about his antibiotics and inhaler usage. His nurse assistant, Sonia Vega, a sharp and dependable woman in her mid-40s, guided the elderly man toward the front pharmacy counter with a warm, reassuring hand on his back. Sonia was known for her precision and intuition, traits that made her essential in such a demanding and understaffed setting. She and Dr. Valdez had worked side by side for 4 years, long enough to develop an unspoken communication in their routine. Dr. Valdez peeked into the waiting area, checking the remaining patients on the schedule. Just one pair sat on the worn plastic chairs. A man in his early 40s, sun-leathered face, strong forearms marked by calluses, his appearance hinting at long days of labor in the fields. He wore a dark green jacket, despite the warmth inside, and clutched a tattered newspaper in his hands. Next to him sat a young girl, about 13 years old. She was dressed in a faded pink t-shirt and matching pants, both several sizes too large for her thin frame. She was hunched forward, arms wrapped protectively around her stomach. Her expression flickered between pain and anxiety, and she rarely looked up from the floor. Her body language radiated unease. Dr. Valdez didn't greet them right away. Instead, he returned to the exam room and resumed entering the final notes for his previous patient. Through the thin drywall, he could still hear the occasional cough, the distant buzz of the old air conditioner trying to fight the desert heat, and the rhythmic ringing of the reception phone. It was the usual nocturnal symphony of Mesquite Valley Clinic. A few minutes later, Sonia stepped in, carrying a tray of sanitized instruments and wipes. She was already spraying disinfectant across the counter and bed as she leaned toward Dr. Valdez and whispered, "Dr. Valdez, the next walk-in pair, something feels off." She kept her voice low, glancing back at the door. "They haven't been here before. No ID. Nothing to file. The man, he's way too controlling. Didn't let the girl say a word. I offered her water, and he cut me off. Said she didn't need anything." Dr. Valdez looked up, brow furrowed. Sonia continued cleaning as she spoke. "And the girl, she looks like she's in real pain. Pale, sweating, kept glancing at the exit like she wanted to run. It just doesn't sit right." Sonia tossed the used wipes into the biohazard bin and faced him fully. "Do you still want to take the case? We can refer them elsewhere." Dr. Valdez leaned back in his chair, silently debating. He'd grown up nearby, trained in the very health conditions that plague this transient population. Abuse, trafficking, exploitation. He'd seen it all too often. And yet, every time, it felt personal. His gaze settled on the small gap in the doorway, through which he could see the girl shift uncomfortably. His chest tightened. "My shift doesn't end for 2 more hours," he said finally. "And she's clearly suffering. We help who we can, Sonia. Even if it's just one kid at a time." Sonia nodded. There was no hesitation in her voice now as she called the next patient. As the door opened, Dr. Valdez caught sight of the man's hand, gripping the girl's wrist just a bit too tightly. The girl, despite her obvious discomfort, complied obediently. Her eyes darted toward the bright red exit sign above the front door, wide and glistening with something close to fear. The man and girl stepped into the room. He didn't release her wrist until they were fully inside. Sonia, ever professional, gave a cordial smile that didn't quite meet her eyes. "Good evening. I'll need to take her vitals first. Just routine." The man's accent was heavy. "She's just got a stomach bug. Don't need no extra nonsense. Just give her something to fix it." The girl, whom Sonia later learned was named Mariella, said nothing. Her face was nearly colorless, and she had a sheen of sweat across her forehead. She clutched her abdomen subtly as she moved, clearly uncomfortable. Sonia remained calm. "I understand, sir, but we need to check her vitals first. It's protocol." The man stared her down for a moment, then gave a curt nod. As he released Mariella's wrist, she flinched slightly, then walked with timid steps toward the vital station. Sonia crouched slightly to wrap the blood pressure cuff around her frail arm. Dr. Valdez stood silently, observing. The girl's readings were not encouraging, blood pressure slightly elevated, oxygen levels borderline low, weight well below the average percentile for her age. The numbers painted a silent but urgent warning. Something was very wrong here. He just didn't know yet how wrong. Dr. Valdez reviewed Mariella's vitals quietly, the silence in the room thick with tension. Her weight, oxygen levels, and blood pressure weren't immediately life-threatening, but they painted the picture of a child under stress, physical, emotional, or both. He handed the clipboard back to Sonia, who then gestured for Mariella to follow her to the examination table. "Mariella," Sonia said softly, "I'm going to help you lie down so Dr. Valdez can examine your stomach, okay?" The girl nodded faintly, barely perceptible, her eyes still fixed downward. As she climbed onto the examination bed, she winced with each movement, her left arm instinctively hugging her side as though trying to protect it. Miguel, the man who claimed to be her father, stepped forward almost immediately. "I'm staying," he said flatly. "I'm not leaving my daughter's side." Dr. Valdez nodded calmly, keeping his voice even and non-confrontational. "You're welcome to remain in the room, Mr. Alvarez, but I'll need to draw the curtain and speak to Mariella privately. It's part of our standard procedure for pediatric patients." Miguel's jaw tensed, and for a second, it looked like he might refuse. But then, after a long pause, he gave a reluctant nod and sat down on the nearby plastic chair, his body stiff with tension, eyes never leaving his daughter. Dr. Valdez drew the thin blue curtain, separating the exam space from the rest of the room. The fabric offered little privacy, the silhouette of Miguel still visible just feet away. "Lie back, please," Dr. Valdez said gently, and Mariella obeyed slowly, wincing again as she adjusted herself. "I'm going to examine your stomach. Let me know if anything hurts." He lifted her shirt just enough to expose her abdomen. Her skin was pale, almost translucent under the harsh clinic light. Dr. Valdez's trained eyes immediately noticed the distension in the upper quadrant, an unnatural firmness beneath the skin. As he began to palpate her abdomen gently, Mariella flinched. "Does it hurt here?" he asked, pressing slightly above her liver. She nodded weakly. "Yes." "Are you feeling bloated? Like something's pressing from the inside?" "Yes," she whispered again. "How's your appetite? Have you eaten anything today?" "Only water." "Yesterday," she said, her voice barely audible, stealing a nervous glance toward the curtain. Dr. Valdez noted the way she hesitated, afraid her answers might reach Miguel's ears. He forced himself to remain calm despite the growing sense of unease pooling in his chest. Her responses didn't align with any common gastrointestinal illness he'd seen, but the rigidity and her guarded demeanor suggested something deeper, more alarming. He completed the exam with professional efficiency, then stepped back and opened the curtain. Miguel immediately stood, taking a step toward the table. "Well," he asked, "just a stomach bug, right?" Dr. Valdez exchanged a glance with Sonia, then faced Miguel with a steady gaze. "I found some unusual abdominal rigidity. I'd like to run an X-ray to get a better look." "X-ray," Miguel repeated sharply. "That's not necessary. Just give her something for the pain, and we'll be on our way." "I can't prescribe medication without understanding what's causing the pain," Dr. Valdez replied, keeping his tone firm but polite. "An X-ray is routine. It helps us check for internal issues, obstructions, infections, or anything else that might explain her symptoms." Miguel's face darkened, but Dr. Valdez pressed on. "She also appears dehydrated. Her lips are cracked, and she's perspiring more than expected given the room temperature." He turned to Sonia. "Can you bring her some water, please?" Sonia nodded and moved toward the sink, but Miguel stepped in front of her path. "No water," he said firmly. "She doesn't want it." Dr. Valdez raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "All right, we'll focus on the imaging first." He printed out the X-ray requisition form and handed it to Miguel. "Please take this to radiology. Sonia will show you the way." Mariella tried to rise from the bed, but she winced and clutched her stomach again. Dr. Valdez stopped her gently. "Sonia, get a wheelchair for her." Sonia returned moments later with a faded black wheelchair. Mariella sank into it with a visible sense of relief. As Sonia began pushing her toward the radiology wing, Dr. Valdez watched Miguel carefully. The man's gaze darted around the hallway, hyper-aware of his surroundings, as if calculating exits. Something was definitely off. Dr. Valdez, now more concerned than ever, followed at a distance, telling Sonia he wanted to review the X-ray as soon as it was ready. The radiology wing was a modest area at the end of the corridor, one room with a single technician, Marco, manning the equipment. Miguel was asked to wait outside while Mariella was prepped. As Dr. Valdez approached, he saw Miguel pacing restlessly and speaking into his phone in hushed Spanish. When Miguel noticed Dr. Valdez, he quickly ended the call and tucked the phone into his jacket pocket. Dr. Valdez said nothing, instead entering the X-ray room where Marco was helping Mariella lie still on the platform. "Lucia," Marco said gently through the microphone. "Stay very still so we can get a clear image." As the machine powered on, with a low hum, Dr. Valdez observed from the side. A whisper floated up from the table, barely audible. "Please don't take me," Mariella said. Dr. Valdez turned sharply toward her, but she was already silent again, eyes shut tightly. Marco adjusted the screen. "The first image was blurry," he said. "Trying again." The second image completed. The digital screen illuminated as the image processed. Both men leaned in, and what they saw made their stomachs drop. Inside the girl's digestive tract were dozens of uniform, oval-shaped shadows. Not food, not tumors. Something denser, clearly foreign. "Marco," Dr. Valdez said urgently. "Send this to my office right now." "What is it?" Marco asked, though his expression already showed he knew. "Drug pellets," Dr. Valdez said grimly. "She's been used as a body packer." He stepped out of the room, pulse racing. Miguel was still in the hallway, pretending to check his phone. Dr. Valdez forced a neutral expression as he passed him, making his way back to his office, where a storm was already building inside him. Dr. Valdez reached his office with urgency in every step, his heart thudding in his chest as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was dim except for the glow of his computer monitor. He immediately opened his email, refreshing the inbox until the message from radiology arrived. Attached were the digital X-rays, and as the images loaded, his suspicions hardened into horrifying certainty. Spread throughout Mariella's intestinal tract were over 24 uniform, oval-shaped shadows. Dr. Valdez clicked to enhance the contrast. Each shadow measured roughly the same size, and their density suggested tightly packed material. Most disturbing was a faint irregularity in one of the objects, an uneven edge that hinted at leakage. He leaned closer, examining the shape. A ruptured pellet could mean exposure to a massive dose of narcotics. For a child, the consequences would be catastrophic. Dr. Valdez sat back in his chair, overwhelmed with anger and fear. He had treated adults used as drug mules before, but never a child this young, never someone this visibly afraid. He pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to steady himself. There was no time for outrage. She needed help. He grabbed his office phone and dialed 911. His voice was low but firm when the operator picked up. "This is Dr. Marco Valdez at Mesquite Valley Community Health Center. I have a pediatric patient, approximately 13 years old, who's been forced to ingest multiple drug packages for smuggling. One appears to be leaking. Immediate police and emergency transport are required." The operator asked for a description. The man claiming to be her father is Hispanic, early 40s, 5'9", muscular build, wearing a green jacket. The girl is 13, extremely thin, pale, wearing pink clothing, dark brown hair. They're still in the building. He paused. "I believe they may attempt to flee once they realize I've identified the pellets. Please hurry." He hung up, then stood and looked out through the small window of his office. The hallway outside was still, the usual nighttime hush enveloping the clinic. But this time, it felt like the calm before storm. He stepped out and made his way to the admin desk, where Sonia and 2 other nurses were discussing supplies. He pulled Sonia aside and whispered, "I've called the police. She's full of drug pellets. One's rupturing." Sonia's eyes widened, hand instinctively covering her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We need to keep them here. Don't alert him." Sonia nodded quickly, her posture tensing. At that moment, Mariella and Miguel appeared at the far end of the hall, accompanied by a radiology tech. Miguel's face was unreadable, but his eyes scanned the room quickly, noting the subtle glances between staff, the low murmurs. He stiffened. Sonia, unaware of the urgency, greeted them calmly. "X-ray is complete," she told Dr. Valdez. "They're waiting in the main room." "Thank you," he said, trying to sound casual. "I'll join them shortly." But when Sonia turned back toward the hallway, she froze. Miguel was no longer standing still. His posture had shifted, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. He gripped Mariella's arm tightly and began walking quickly toward the side exit. "Hey," called an elderly patient in the waiting room. "What are you doing to that girl?" "Stop them," Dr. Valdez shouted. He sprinted after them, joined by 2 male nurses. Miguel shoved open the side exit, practically dragging Mariella, who stumbled with a cry. Outside, the night was quiet and dark. Gravel crunched underfoot as Miguel forced her into a parked sedan. Tires screeched against the asphalt as the car peeled away from the lot. "Did anyone get the license plate?" Dr. Valdez called out breathlessly. The parking lot was too dim. The taillights were already fading into the distance. "No," one nurse said. "Too fast." Within 5 minutes, police cruisers pulled in, sirens off, but lights flashing blue and red across the walls. Officer Ramon Cruz, a veteran with the Border Task Force, took the doctor's report with a grim expression. He examined the printed X-rays Dr. Valdez had provided. "We'll put out an alert," he said. "But with no ID, no clear photo, it'll be tough." Dr. Valdez pointed urgently at the printout. "That pellet is leaking. She's probably overdosing right now. She'll die without intervention." Officer Cruz didn't flinch. I understand, but you need to understand this, too. These kids are disposable to these operations. They use minors because of leniency in sentencing. And if something goes wrong, he trailed off, eyes darkening. So we just give up? Dr. Valdez snapped. We're stretched thin, but I'll alert all border checkpoints. Officer Cruz took detailed descriptions and asked about any distinguishing marks, tattoos, scars. Nothing obvious, Dr. Valdez said. Cruz sighed again. We'll try. But doctor, we've seen this before. Children used as couriers, trafficked. Some disappear forever. That thought chilled Dr. Valdez more than he cared to admit. Miguel and Mariela were gone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't gone far. He returned to the exam room with Sonia in silence. Work resumed. Patients still needed care, but the image of the girl's terrified face haunted him with every passing minute. The clinic gradually settled back into its quiet nighttime rhythm, though for Dr. Valdez, there was no settling. Every sound felt amplified. The buzz of the lights, the ticking of a clock, the rustle of a nurse's coat. Patients still came in with minor complaints, a mild infection, a sore shoulder, a follow-up for blood pressure. He treated them all, but his thoughts never strayed far from Mariela. By 11:45 p.m., the clinic closed for the night. Nurses signed out, and the janitor began his slow sweep across the hallways. Sonia placed a gentle hand on Dr. Valdez's shoulder before leaving. You did what you could, she said quietly. He nodded, though the weight of failure pressed heavily on his chest. He waited until the building was nearly empty, then sat down in his office and began reviewing literature on body packing. He needed to know what would happen if the pellet in Mariela's abdomen had ruptured. The studies were grim. Most adults could tolerate only a limited leakage before experiencing a massive overdose. Children were even more vulnerable. If untreated, mortality was almost guaranteed. He scrolled through clinical photos, case studies, emergency interventions. After 15 minutes of reading, he pushed away from his desk, exhausted but restless. He gathered his belongings, locked the clinic's side door behind him, and stepped into the dimly lit parking lot. His car sat alone beneath a flickering lamp. As he approached, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Something felt wrong. He quickened his pace slightly, reaching for his keys. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, and he felt the cold press of a gun barrel against his back. Don't move, a voice growled. It was Miguel, Dr. Valdez raised his hands slowly and dropped his bag to the ground. Examine my daughter, Miguel said. Help her. His voice trembled, not with anger, but fear. Dr. Valdez didn't hesitate. Where is she? Back at the clinic, Miguel said. Side entrance. Walk. No sudden moves. They moved quickly but carefully, looping back toward the locked door. Dr. Valdez used his keycard to unlock it and stepped inside. As they turned the corner, he saw her. Mariela was lying motionless near the emergency room, her skin tinged blue, foam at the corners of her mouth, breathing shallow and erratic. Miguel's voice cracked. Fix her. Dr. Valdez knelt beside her and checked her pulse. It was faint, thready. One of the pellets ruptured. She's overdosing, he said calmly. I need you to lower the gun. I can't help her if you're threatening me. Miguel's hand shook, his finger twitching near the trigger. You'll call the police again. I won't, Dr. Valdez replied, locking eyes with him. But she's dying. Every second counts. Let me work. Miguel lowered the weapon slightly. Save her. Dr. Valdez unlocked the main emergency room and lifted Mariela carefully. Her body felt frighteningly light. He placed her on the treatment bed and moved quickly, setting up in 4 for hydration, preparing for emergency bowel irrigation. She needs to be sedated, he said, to make this process easier on her. Miguel stood just feet away, the gun now tucked into his waistband but still visible. "Do it," he said. Dr. Valdez administered a mild sedative and began the procedure, monitoring her vitals closely. "This will flush out some of the drugs," he explained, "but it's not enough. She needs surgery to remove the rest." "Then do it," Miguel said. "I can't," Dr. Valdez responded. "I don't have the tools. But I know someone who does. A vet. He has a surgical suite. We can go there." Miguel's eyes narrowed. "A vet? You want to take her to an animal clinic?" "He has the right equipment," Dr. Valdez insisted. "It's her only chance." Miguel hesitated, then nodded. "But if this is a trick, it's not." Dr. Valdez stood. "I need to call him." "No," Miguel snapped, drawing his gun again. "You stay. I'll watch her. You call from the front desk." Dr. Valdez moved slowly toward the administration area. He picked up the phone and dialed for an ambulance. "This is Dr. Marco Valdez at Mesquite Valley Clinic," he whispered. "Pediatric emergency. Body packing rupture. Hostage situation." He was about to give more details when the click of a gun barrel pressed against the back of his head stopped him. Miguel had followed him. "Cancel the call," he said. Dr. Valdez's heart sank. Into the phone, he said, "False alarm. Disregard." He hung up. Miguel marched him back to the ER room, then used medical gauze to bind Dr. Valdez's hands behind the chair. "You'll stay until help arrives," Miguel muttered, pulling out his phone and making a call. He spoke rapidly in Spanish. Dr. Valdez caught enough to understand. Complications, the doctor discovered everything, bring transport. "He's with me. 20 minutes. Miguel turned back to Dr. Valdez. "They're sending a team. We'll leave soon. And doctor, if you try anything again, I swear, you care about her," Dr. Valdez said quietly. Miguel looked away. "She's all I have left." Minutes later, a van arrived. Men in black scrubs entered silently. They prepped Mariela and moved her onto a stretcher. One man gestured toward Dr. Valdez. "Take him too," he said to Miguel. Miguel nodded. They placed a burlap sack over Dr. Valdez's head and led him out into the night. Dr. Valdez had no concept of time as the van sped away from the clinic. The burlap sack over his head blocked all light, muffled all sound except the rumble of the engine and the occasional sharp turn that sent him sliding slightly on the metal floor. His hands, still bound behind him, had gone numb. He tried to stay calm, to breathe slowly, to think. After what felt like an eternity, the vehicle stopped. The doors opened, and hands yanked him upright, leading him through a set of creaking metal doors. The sack was ripped off his head, and Dr. Valdez blinked rapidly, his eyes adjusting to the harsh blue-white glare of overhead lights. He was in what looked like a warehouse, but it had been converted into a makeshift medical facility. Concrete floors, metal walls, no windows. At the center of the room was a surgical table surrounded by sleek equipment and bright lights. A team of 3 people in black medical scrubs and face masks worked silently, moving with professional precision. Mariela lay on the table, unconscious, her small frame dwarfed by the machinery. A monitor showed her vitals, weak but present. One of the masked surgeons glanced at Dr. Valdez, then returned to their work without a word. Another figure stepped forward, a tall man with a shaved head and a jagged scar running from his left eye to his jaw. His eyes were cold, calculating. "You're involved now," he said in a surprisingly calm voice. "You'll assist or you'll be disposed of. We know you were a surgeon before becoming an internist. Useful." Dr. Valdez said nothing, keeping his expression neutral even as his stomach churned. He was led to a corner of the room and tied to a chair, this time more loosely. The scarred man paced slowly. "You have 2 choices," he said. "Option 1, cooperate. Learn our procedures. Become part of our operation. We pay well. Option 2. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Another masked man entered, pushing a boy no older than 10 into the room. The child's eyes were wide with terror, his small body trembling. The scarred man gestured to the table. You'll help implant the pellets into him, or we'll put them in you. Dr. Valdez recoiled instinctively, his entire body tense. He looked at the boy, then at Mariella, still unconscious from the earlier operation. He had no words, no options. The scarred man smirked. Change into scrubs. Shower first. A silent nurse handed him black scrubs and pointed toward a side room. Dr. Valdez stood slowly, testing the bonds. They were tight, but not unbreakable. He kept calm, pretending to comply. The shower room was basic, just a stall, a sink, and a mirror. As he changed, he stared at his reflection. This wasn't medicine. This was slaughterhouse work, done with surgical precision. He made a decision. Whatever happened, he wouldn't become one of them. When he emerged, the nurse led him back to the operating room. The lead surgeon, still masked, gestured for him to stand nearby. Watch this time, the surgeon said. Next time, you assist. Dr. Valdez nodded, feigning interest. The boy was now sedated and strapped to the table. The lead surgeon began disinfecting the child's abdomen. What happened to the girl? Dr. Valdez asked quietly. Mariela. The surgeon didn't look up. She's recovering. For now. If she can't carry again, they'll harvest her. Harvest. The word caught in Dr. Valdez's throat. The surgeon shrugged. Organs. Young livers. Kidneys. Eyes. All have markets. Dr. Valdez felt cold. He looked around the room. Monitors. Metal trays. Sealed containers. Everything was professional, clinical, efficient. And yet everything was wrong. He sat quietly in the chair they placed him in, his wrists loosely bound once more. Miguel entered the room, walked over, and tied him, again, not too tightly. Their eyes met. Miguel leaned in. Save my daughter. Corridor to the left. Room 15. Take this. He pressed a small key into Dr. Valdez's palm. You'll know what to do. Then he walked away, standing beside the scarred man. The surgery on the boy began. Dr. Valdez watched, pretending to be docile. As the team focused on the incision, he worked at the knots. Slowly, carefully. When no one was watching, he slipped the restraint off, stood, and walked backward toward the door. He turned the lock with a soft click. That was when the nurse noticed. Hey, she shouted, but the door held. Dr. Valdez sprinted down the hallway, the key clutched tightly. He turned left, counted 3 doors, and unlocked room 15. Inside, Mariella lay on a bed, still unconscious, but breathing steadily. He checked her pulse. Stable. He dialed 911 again. This is Dr. Marco Valdez, he whispered. I've located the child. We're in an illegal surgical site. Here's the address. He read the numbers from a chart on the wall. They're trafficking drugs and organs. Armed guards. Please hurry. Stay on the line, the operator said. But Dr. Valdez ended the call. He positioned himself between Mariella and the door. Minutes later, flashing lights pierced the night through the window. Sirens. Doors bursting. Gunfire. A masked man opened the door, raised a gun, fired. The bullet splintered the wall beside Dr. Valdez's head. Before the second shot, officers tackled the man to the ground. Dr. Valdez raised his hands. I'm the doctor. The girl needs medical attention. She's been through surgery. She's stable but weak. Officers secured the area, and paramedics rushed in. As they wheeled Mariella out, Dr. Valdez followed. Outside, the building was swarming with tactical teams. Officers escorted the surgical team into police vans. One boy, sedated, was loaded into another ambulance. Dr. Valdez looked around. He saw Miguel, bleeding from a wound in his arm, being dragged in cuffs. Their eyes met. Miguel gave a small nod. Dr. Valdez understood. Miguel had shot himself, to make it look like he was a hostage, too. One final favor to protect the secret. As the police secured the perimeter and paramedics stabilized Mariela, Dr. Valdez stood near the ambulance, still trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. The chaos of the raid had passed, but the weight of what he had witnessed remained heavy on his shoulders. Officers moved in and out of the building, cataloging evidence, taking photographs, and questioning the suspects. Several of the masked medical personnel were unmasked and handcuffed, their expressions blank or defiant. Dr. Valdez watched as one of the stretchers was wheeled toward a separate ambulance. It was the boy who had been on the operating table, still unconscious, but breathing. The paramedics worked quickly, establishing 4 lines and monitoring his vitals. A sliver of hope passed through Dr. Valdez's chest. Perhaps he, too, could be saved. Then he saw them, Miguel and the other key members of the operation, including the lead surgeon and the scarred man, being escorted toward a police van. Their black scrubs were now stained, their faces revealed for the first time. Miguel's arm was bandaged where he had been shot, and though the injury was superficial, it was convincing enough. Their eyes met across the parking lot, and for a brief moment, time stood still. Miguel gave a faint nod, a silent gesture of acknowledgement, of thanks, and of farewell. Dr. Valdez nodded in return, understanding that whatever Miguel had done, however complicit he had been in this operation, his final act had been one of redemption. An officer approached. "Dr. Valdez, we need your statement. One of our units will take you to the station." "I want to check on the girl first," he said. "Mariela." "Of course," the officer replied, and led him to the waiting ambulance. Inside, Mariela was hooked to monitors and receiving fluids. Her eyes were closed, but her breathing was steadier. A paramedic turned to Dr. Valdez. "She's stable for now. Whoever did the surgery, well, it was professionally done. She'll need continued monitoring, but her prognosis looks good." Dr. Valdez exhaled deeply, his body finally registering the exhaustion he had pushed aside for hours. "Take care of her," he said. "Please." "We will," the paramedic assured him. Dr. Valdez stepped back and allowed the door to close. As the ambulance pulled away, its lights flashing silently into the night, he turned and followed the officer to a patrol car. The drive to the station was quiet. Dr. Valdez stared out the window at the dark desert landscape, the stars overhead shining brightly and indifferently. He thought of Mariela, of the boy on the table, of the nameless children who had passed through that facility. When they arrived, he was led into a clean, fluorescent-lit interview room where Detective Elena Ramirez sat behind a desk. She was middle-aged, sharply dressed, and had the look of someone who had seen too much and was tired of pretending otherwise. "Dr. Valdez," she said, offering a polite nod. "I understand this has been a harrowing night. Please, take your time. Start from the beginning." And he did. He told her everything, how Mariela and Miguel had first arrived at the clinic, her symptoms, the suspicious behavior, the x-rays, and the realization that the girl was being used to smuggle drugs. He described calling 911, the subsequent escape, and Miguel's later return. "He forced me to help her," Dr. Valdez said, keeping his tone steady. "She was overdosing. I couldn't turn her away." "And after that?" Detective Ramirez asked, taking notes. "He took me to a warehouse-turned-surgical site. I was tied up, watched them operate on her. They told me I'd either assist or be used as a mule myself. But you escaped." With Miguel's help, Dr. Valdez said, choosing his words carefully. He slipped me a key, loosened my restraints. I found the girl and called for help. Miguel Alvarez, Ramirez confirmed, flipping through a folder. He says you shot him and kidnapped the girl. That you led police there. Dr. Valdez paused, then nodded. He's lying. But it's part of his cover. I believe he did it to protect me and his daughter. Ramirez tilted her head. So he helped you? In the end, Dr. Valdez said. Yes. Ramirez leaned back in her chair. You're lucky to be alive. What you uncovered tonight, it's big. The facility was clean, the staff trained. This wasn't an amateur operation. We've already linked some of the suspects to the Alonso cartel. Then it's not over, Dr. Valdez said. There are more like her. More children. We'll pursue every lead, Ramirez promised. But this was a major break, and your testimony will be crucial. What about Mariela? He asked. Where will she go? She's in protective custody for now, Ramirez replied. We're working with child services, but she'll need a guardian. I promised her father I'd take care of her, Dr. Valdez said quietly. I meant it. Ramirez studied him for a moment, then nodded. We'll see what we can do. Hours later, after giving his full statement and reviewing evidence photos, Dr. Valdez was allowed to leave. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten with the first hints of dawn. A young officer offered him a ride to the hospital. Dr. Valdez accepted. At the pediatric ICU, Mariela was in a private room, under careful watch. When he stepped inside, her eyes fluttered open. She looked at him and smiled faintly. You came back. Of course, he said, sitting beside her. How are you feeling? Better, she whispered. Not hurting so much now. He poured her a cup of water, and she drank slowly. Your father, he said gently. He helped me save you. He gave me the key. He made sure you'd be okay. Tears welled in her eyes. He wasn't always bad, she whispered, but they made him do things. Made us do things. I know, he said. He wanted you to have a chance. A different life. She looked at him with quiet hope. Will I be alone now? No, he said. You won't be. I promised I'd take care of you. Her fingers curled around his hand. Thank you. As she drifted back to sleep, Dr. Valdez remained at her side, his heart full of grief and resolve. Whatever came next, he would protect her. He would give her a future. And maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to forgive himself for all the ones he couldn't save. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft pink glow across the hospital parking lot, Dr. Valdez stood at the window of Mariela's room, sipping stale coffee from a plastic cup. Behind him, machines hummed quietly, their steady beeps tracking the rhythms of Mariela's slow recovery. She was still asleep, her small frame looking even more fragile under the crisp white hospital blanket, but the color had returned to her cheeks, and her vitals were stable. The horror of the previous night still lingered in Dr. Valdez's mind like a storm cloud refusing to dissipate. He had witnessed a world most people only read about, one where children were used as vessels, where lives were traded for profit, and where doctors could be forced to become accomplices. But despite the trauma, something deeper had taken root in him. Purpose. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. Detective Elena Ramirez entered, holding a folder and a tablet. Morning, doctor, she said softly, nodding toward the bed. She's doing well, considering. Dr. Valdez nodded. She's strong. Ramirez pulled a chair and sat beside him. We've made arrests at 3 other sites this morning, she began. The evidence you gave us, along with what we recovered from that facility, was invaluable. We seized nearly half a ton of cocaine pellets and rescued 6 other minors, all in similar conditions. Dr. Valdez exhaled in disbelief. 6 others. Yes, Ramirez confirmed. Some in worse condition. Most were being prepped for transport. One girl had already been sedated for organ harvest. We arrived just in time. Dr. Valdez closed his eyes momentarily, overwhelmed. And Miguel? He's being processed, Ramirez said, opening the folder. His statement still matches your account. He claims you kidnapped the girl and shot him. He hasn't broken character. But we found inconsistencies in his records. There's a good chance we can isolate his role and minimize his sentencing. He did the right thing in the end, Dr. Valdez said quietly. I know, Ramirez replied. That's why I'm here. The DA's office is considering offering him a deal. Lesser charges in exchange for deeper cooperation. He knows a lot. If he's willing to talk, this could unravel the entire network. He'll talk, Dr. Valdez said confidently. If it protects her, he'll talk. Ramirez nodded, then tapped her tablet. There's another issue, though. Mariela. She's undocumented, no official ID, no relatives stepping forward. Child services is stretched thin. I want guardianship, Dr. Valdez said immediately. I want to take care of her. Ramirez didn't seem surprised. I thought you might say that. It won't be easy. There's paperwork, hearings, background checks. I'll do it, he said firmly. I made a promise. I intend to keep it. Ramirez smiled slightly. Then we'll start the process. In the meantime, she'll remain under protective custody here. Officers are posted at the door in case anyone comes looking. She rose from the chair. There's one more thing. She handed him a sealed plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small locket. This was found in Miguel's pocket. He said it belonged to Mariella's mother. He asked us to give it to you for her. Dr. Valdez accepted the bag, staring at the delicate silver charm. A tiny flower design was etched into the metal, now dulled with age but still intact. He turned back to the bed and placed it gently on the bedside table. Thank you, he said. Ramirez left quietly. Hours passed. Nurses checked vitals, adjusted IVs. Dr. Valdez remained by Mariella's side, reviewing patient files, reading articles on trauma recovery in children. He knew the road ahead would be long, not just medically, but emotionally. When Mariella awoke again, her eyes found his instantly. You're still here, she murmured. Always, he replied. She reached, weakly, toward the locket. That was my mom's. He helped her open it. Inside was a tiny photo, faded but visible. A young woman with soft eyes and long hair. Mariella smiled. She used to sing to me when I was scared. You're safe now, Dr. Valdez said. No one will hurt you again. She nodded, eyes closing slowly, comforted. The next morning, a hospital administrator arrived with a social worker. They began the paperwork for temporary guardianship, with Dr. Valdez signing form after form. His medical license, income, background, everything would be scrutinized. But he didn't care. Later, he was summoned back to the police station for further debriefing. While he was gone, officers kept constant watch over Mariella. At the station, Detective Ramirez brought him into a conference room where federal agents now joined the investigation. Maps, photos, digital evidence lined the walls. We believe this was just one hub, said a man in a dark suit. The Alonzo cartel operates in over 10 states. What you witnessed is just a glimpse. Dr. Valdez offered what he could, descriptions, procedures, even names he overheard. Every detail mattered. When he returned to the hospital that night, Mariella was asleep again, holding the locket in her hand. He sat beside her, whispering promises into the quiet. The past could not be erased, but the future, they would build it together. Weeks passed, and the hospital room that had once felt like a sterile holding space began to feel like a sanctuary. Mariella's strength returned day by day, her appetite improved. Her cheeks filled out, and her laughter, though rare, began to surface. Dr. Valdez spent most of his free hours at her side, bringing puzzles, books, and stories to distract from the reality of blood tests and therapy sessions. The nurses began referring to him affectionately as Dad when they spoke to Mariella, and although the term made him blush, he didn't correct them. One afternoon, as the sun poured into the room and painted golden stripes across the tile floor, Mariella turned to him with a look of tentative hope. "What's going to happen to me now?" she asked. Dr. Valdez set down the medical journal he had been reading. "We're going to find you a school and a safe place to live. If the court allows it, that place will be with me." "Really?" Her voice was small. "You want me?" "I promised your father I would take care of you," he said gently. "But even if I hadn't made that promise, I'd still want you with me." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. She simply nodded. The guardianship process was long and grueling. Social workers conducted interviews. Home inspections were arranged. A child psychologist met with Mariella weekly to assess her mental and emotional state. Through it all, Dr. Valdez was unwavering. He adjusted his clinic hours to ensure he could meet every requirement, filled out every form, answered every call. Meanwhile, Detective Ramirez and the federal agents continued their investigation. More warehouses were raided. Names surfaced: distributors, drivers, handlers. Miguel's testimony turned out to be critical. In exchange for his cooperation, the DA offered him a reduced sentence. He would serve time, but in a federal facility far from the cartel's reach. Dr. Valdez received word through Ramirez that Miguel had requested one favor: a letter not to be delivered to Mariella, but to be entrusted to Dr. Valdez with the request that he decide if and when Mariella was ready to read it. The envelope was sealed, the handwriting neat and deliberate. Dr. Valdez placed it in his personal safe, deciding that the day might come, but not yet. One morning, 2 months after her rescue, Mariella was discharged from a hospital. She clutched a small stuffed bear the nurses had gifted her, wearing new clothes that Dr. Valdez had bought from a local shop. As they walked out of the hospital together, a warm breeze swept through the parking lot. "Where are we going?" she asked, squinting in the sunlight. "Home," he said. His house was modest, a small one-story just outside town, surrounded by mesquite trees and the faint sound of distant traffic. Inside, it smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. A bedroom had been prepared just for her, with soft blue walls and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Mariella stood in the doorway, speechless. "This is yours," he said. "No one will ever hurt you here." Over the next few weeks, life began to resemble something close to normal. Mariella started attending a private school under a special scholarship arranged by Ramirez's department. Dr. Valdez packed her lunches, drove her to school, and helped her with homework. Some nights were harder than others. She would wake from nightmares, sobbing silently, and he would sit by her bed, holding her hand until she fell asleep again. Therapy continued. Trust took time, but progress was being made. One evening, as they sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Mariella turned to him. "Do you think my father ever really loved me?" Dr. Valdez looked out at the orange sky for a moment before answering. "I think he did, but he didn't know how to protect you from the world he was trapped in. He tried, in the only way he knew." She nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "I miss him, even the bad parts." "It's okay to feel that way," he said. "Feelings are complicated, especially with people we love." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the locket. "I want to keep this forever," she said. "It reminds me of her, of who I was before, and who you're becoming," he added. She smiled softly. That night, as she slept peacefully for the first time in days, Dr. Valdez sat in his study, the unopened letter from Miguel resting on his desk. He picked it up, ran his fingers along the edges, and then returned it to the safe. Not yet. Mariella was healing. The scars would never fully fade, but she was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor. And in their quiet corner of the world, guarded by trees and time, a new chapter was beginning. Months slipped by, each one subtly reshaping the rhythm of life for Dr. Valdez and Mariella. What had once been a relationship built on crisis had softened into something warm, steady, and profoundly human. Mariella began to thrive, not just physically, but emotionally. Her grades improved, her circle of friends widened, and her laughter became a daily sound in the small house shaded by mesquite trees. She helped Dr. Valdez tend to the modest garden out back, often telling stories while they pulled weeds or watered the plants. She still had nightmares from time to time, waking in a cold sweat with the memory of dark rooms and surgical masks etched behind her eyelids. But she was learning how to breathe through the fear, how to ground herself in the safety of her new life. Therapy helped, and so did the stability of routine, breakfasts of warm oatmeal, drives to school with music playing softly, afternoons reading in the hammock. And every evening, without fail, Dr. Valdez sat with her on the porch as the sun dipped low, casting the sky in hues of fire and dusk. It was during one such evening, nearly a year since her escape, that she asked about the letter. Dr. Valdez froze mid-sip of his tea, setting the mug down gently on the porch railing. "What letter?" he asked, though he already knew. "The one my father left," Mariella said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes searched his. "You never mentioned it, but I know he wrote something. I saw Ramirez hand you something the day we left the hospital." Dr. Valdez sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I wasn't sure if you were ready. He asked me to wait, to let you decide." "I'm ready now," she said, her voice firm. That night, after she was asleep, Dr. Valdez retrieved the letter from the safe. The envelope was slightly creased, the paper inside yellowed slightly at the edges, but the handwriting was still bold. He placed it on her desk without a word. The next morning, he found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, the envelope torn open and the letter unfolded in her hands. Her face was unreadable as she stared at the words. When he entered, she looked up. Her eyes were red, but not from sorrow alone. "He told me he loved me," she said. "He said he didn't know how to protect me, that he thought the only way to keep me alive was to make me invisible, to hide me behind the drugs so no one would see me." Dr. Valdez sat beside her. "That was his mistake. But in the end, he chose you over them. He risked everything so you could be free." She nodded slowly. "He said he was proud of me, that I had more courage than he ever did." She folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her locket. "I'm not angry anymore, just sad that it took him so long to do the right thing. Sometimes," Dr. Valdez said gently, "people grow up broken. They don't know how to be good parents, even if they love their children deeply. It's not an excuse, but it's a truth." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I'm glad I have you now." He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. In the weeks that followed, the letter became a quiet presence in their home. Mariella never spoke of it again, but she wore the locket more often, and there was a calmness in her that hadn't been there before. The case against the cartel continued. Dr. Valdez testified in court twice, facing defense attorneys who tried to poke holes in his story. But the evidence was overwhelming, the survivors' testimonies damning. Several key figures were sentenced to decades in federal prison, including the scarred man and the lead surgeon. Miguel's sentence was lighter, 10 years, with eligibility for parole in 6. He wrote one more letter to Dr. Valdez, thanking him for keeping his promise. Dr. Valdez never replied. One day, nearly a year and a half after it all began, Mariella stood on a small stage at her school, accepting an award for courage and perseverance. She didn't mention the past in her speech. She simply thanked her guardian, who became a father, and dedicated her award to the people who see us even when we're invisible. Dr. Valdez clapped until his hands hurt, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. After the ceremony, they drove home in silence, the radio playing softly. At a stoplight, Mariella turned to him. "Do you think we'll ever stop talking about what happened?" He thought about it. "Maybe not. But one day, it won't hurt the same." She nodded. "Good." That night, they sat on the porch as they always did, watching the stars emerge one by one. And for the first time in a long time, the world felt quiet, not because it was empty, but because it was whole. 2 years after that fateful night at the clinic, the desert town of El Encanto had returned to its quiet routines, but something within it had changed. At the Mesquite Valley Community Health Clinic, patients still shuffled in with sprained ankles, flu symptoms, and worries about blood sugar. But now, they also came with questions about the doctor who had risked everything. Dr. Marco Valdez had become somewhat of a local legend, though he never sought the attention. He still wore the same faded, white coat, still offered the same warm smile, and still greeted every patient with respect, whether they were documented or not. The staff, nurses, assistants, janitors, all treated him with quiet reverence. But none more so than the young girl who walked into the clinic every Friday afternoon carrying a small canvas tote, her dark hair braided neatly, a sketchbook tucked beneath her arm. Mariella was 13 now, her presence calm but purposeful. She volunteered at the clinic every week, organizing medical supplies, reading to younger patients in the waiting area, and helping the front desk file records. Her energy was different from other kids her age, more grounded, more deliberate. She still carried the locket around her neck, and sometimes, when no one was looking, she would press it to her chest like a silent prayer. That morning, as Dr. Valdez finished consulting with a new patient, he heard a soft knock on his office door. "She's here," Nurse Sonia said with a grin. She brought cookies. Mariella entered behind her, holding a tin wrapped in tissue paper. "I made them for the staff," she said, setting the tin down on the break room counter. "Chocolate chip and cinnamon." "Thank you, sweetheart," Sonia replied, giving her a squeeze on the shoulder. "You spoil us. Dr. Valdez smiled, watching the scene. "Come walk with me," he said to Mariella. Outside, the late afternoon sun was warm, casting long shadows across the gravel parking lot. They walked toward the garden behind the clinic, where desert wildflowers grew resilient and fierce between patches of dry earth. "You've been quiet this week," he said gently. Mariella shrugged, kicking a small rock with her sneaker. "I've been thinking a lot. About what's next. High school, college, all of it." "That's a good thing to think about," Dr. Valdez said. "It means you're planning for your future." She stopped walking and looked up at him. "I want to help people, the way you helped me. Maybe not as a doctor, but something." He crouched beside her, so their eyes were level. "You already help people, every single week. And no matter what you choose to become, a teacher, a writer, a social worker, you'll carry that light with you." She gave him a small, grateful smile. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I didn't come to the clinic that night?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember what did happen, and I choose to live in that truth instead." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of cicadas and distant traffic filling the air. After a long pause, Mariella reached into her pocket and pulled out the folded letter from her father. It was creased and faded now, but carefully preserved. "I'm thinking about writing him back," she said softly. "Even if he never sees it, just to let it go." "That sounds like a beautiful idea," Dr. Valdez said. "Do you want help?" No, she replied. I think I need to do this one on my own. That evening, while Dr. Valdez prepared dinner, Mariella sat at her desk in her room, pen in hand. She stared at the blank page for a long time before finally writing, Dear Papa, I forgive you. I don't understand all the choices you made, but I know you loved me in the only way you knew how. I wish things had been different. I wish you could have been the one to help me become who I am now. But even from far away, you gave me the strength to survive. Thank you for that. I hope you're safe. I hope you find peace. Love, Mariella. She folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and tucked it beside her father's original note. Then she returned the locket around her neck and exhaled deeply. The next few weeks were filled with school projects, clinic visits, and weekend hikes with Dr. Valdez. Life had its rhythm again, steady, sometimes unpredictable, but always forward-moving. One Saturday, they drove to a nearby town for a community event honoring medical professionals. Dr. Valdez was presented with a plaque recognizing his work in underserved communities. He accepted it humbly, his speech short and sincere. Healing, he said, isn't just about medicine. It's about presence, patience, and the promise that no one is ever truly alone. Mariella stood in the front row, her hands clasped tightly, eyes shining with pride. When they returned home that evening, she placed a plaque next to the photo of her mother on the mantel. She would have been proud too, she whispered. That night, they sat once again on the back porch. The stars overhead blinked like secret lanterns. Mariella leaned her head on Dr. Valdez's shoulder. Do you think this is what my dad hoped for when he let me go? She asked. I think, Dr. Valdez replied, that he hoped for your life to be bigger than the one he could offer. And I think you've made it that way. She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, she said, I think I want to become a social worker. Maybe even open a shelter someday, for girls like me. He smiled, feeling tears well up behind his eyes. Then that's exactly what you'll do. And in that moment, beneath the infinite sky, with wounds still healing and dreams just beginning, their story found its quiet ending, not in silence, but in the promise of everything still to come. If you felt something while watching this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps us keep telling these stories. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. And if your heart was touched, drop a God bless her in the comments to let us know you're praying too.